All right, welcome to Your Story. I'm your host, Travis Dockery, and today I've got maybe the most important person I'll ever have because she's my boss. So, Becky Long is on the show today. Becky, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. We're right next door, aren't we?
Yeah, we're where we always are, but I thought this would be a good way to kick it off by talking to you. And if you're just learning about your story, all it is people who are influential in Clay County in western North Carolina that a lot of people know but maybe don't really know. So we're going to talk to people and find out their story. So Becky, tell us where your story starts and when.
Well, my story starts in little old Hiawassee, Georgia, where I was born.
All the way in Hiawassee.
All the way across the line. I was born at 6:30 on a Sunday, April 1st, 1962. And that was the beginning. Of course, I don't remember much for the next 3 or 4 years. But Mom and Dad had a house on Qualla. They had just built it. And when I was 3 or 4 years old, we ended up moving to Grundy, Virginia. And I think you're familiar with that place.
Tell people a little bit about Grundy, because I think it was the first or second time you and I talked, we discovered that we had that common ground in Grundy, Virginia, of all places.
It's so funny how people are brought into your lives and you don't have any idea what you have in common, but Dad worked for Georgia Pacific, and he was transferred to Grundy, Virginia, and of course it's a small coal mining town.
Yeah.
It's about an hour and a half from Bristol, and it was such a change for my mom mostly. I was 4. I don't remember a whole lot about it.
So,
it was different. You know what the mountains are like up there.
Much more steeper.
It's straight up.
Yep.
You feel like you're in a valley all the time, but the people are wonderful there. I went to 9th grade there and had so many good friends. And then we moved to Bluefield, West Virginia, about an hour and a half away from there. And Dad eventually got in the coal mines like most people in that area.
Yeah.
And ended up graduating from Bluefield High School.
So then your earliest memories probably start in Grundy, right?
They start in Grundy. We came, all our families lived here. So we came here often to my granny's house on Qualla Road, and my dad's family, Robert and Fanny Long, lived here. So all holidays were spent here. A lot of summers were spent here.
So you never lost that connection then?
This was always home to me.
Oh, okay.
You know, if you're a kid and you run away from home, I thought you could just go across the mountain and I would be in Hayesville at my granny's house. In fact, I enrolled myself in school here one year in the 7th grade.
Share that. You've told me that before.
Well, you wouldn't think, you probably couldn't do it now, but I came to spend the summer with my granny, and my Aunt Bob and Vicky lived here, and I stayed with them a lot. And I talked Vicky into let me start school. And I said, well, when they come back, I'll go home with them. And I didn't even really tell Mom and Dad till they came to pick me up. And they were quite shocked, of course. So I was looking at a pretty good whipping there. But instead they sat down and talked to me, and they explained that in 7th grade I can't make my own decisions about where I'm going to live or go to school. So I ended up going to school about a week, and I was hauled back to Grundy.
Back to Grundy. And then kind of finish up our connection. Turns out that my aunt and uncle actually babysat you a couple of times.
Yes, that is so ironic. We lived in a place called Slate Creek, which you know exactly where that is. And they lived maybe 2 or 3 miles above us, and they were good friends with my parents. And I think they may have even worked with Dad here and there.
Yeah, I think so.
Mines.
But of all places.
Yeah, and I had no idea when I hired you.
And
I just hired you for your looks. I didn't know you had a little bit of Grundy in your blood.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that hired me for my looks. That's why we're doing an audio show.
Yeah.
You know? All right, so you graduate high school in Bluefield. What's the next step for you there?
Well, I went to Bluefield State College for a little while, and I wasn't into that too much, so I ended up going to Southwestern Community College, and I took accounting. But I always loved to write, so people generally who love to write are not into accounting that much.
Yeah, it's
a either or usually.
Yeah, that creativity versus the definites of accounting, that doesn't balance, does
Well,
it?
the accounting turned out to help me, though, because I ended up being a bookkeeper for my dad at his mine. And my office was literally a little storage building right on the mine. In addition to doing payroll and all that, I had to load coal in the coal trucks.
So you've actually done a little coal mining work.
I've been in the mines a couple of times. It's pretty scary.
Yeah,
but,
I couldn't handle that.
You know, you have to lay down in what they call a scoop.
Right.
Ride back there, and there's a lot of mud holes and stuff. And then the roof is just held up with roof bolts, and, you know, it's a pretty scary situation.
Sounds pleasant.
But I worked with my brother Larry at the coal mine, so he loved to send me in the mine. He knew it scared me to death. And he would tell him to bump me in the mud puddles and all that stuff.
To make it even worse.
To make it worse. But
what are brothers for, right?
it was fun, though. It's funny, you learn so much along the way. We had 25 men working for us, and they were just so good to me.
Yeah.
But from my little office, I had a radio to them inside the mine, and if the inspector came, you know, I'd call in and say, hey,
Heads up.
make sure you got everything right, because they're right here on site. But it was a great experience. I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
So was that after college or working your way
It was
through
after.
college? After?
Yeah.
Okay, so then this may be a big jump, but how do you go from accounting at a coal mine to newspaper life in Hayesville?
Well, I'm going to jump back just a little bit and give you a little background. If you teachers who don't think you make a difference, let me tell you, you do. When I was in the third grade, Mrs. Smith, I think her first name was Jean. Of course, we weren't allowed to call them.
No, not back then. Was
their first names, and often didn't even know what it was. But she told me that I had a talent for writing, and even though I was in the third grade, it really impressed upon me how much I enjoyed it too. So it was something I really loved to do, and she noticed. And she said, Becky, I hope you will go into something where you're writing. She said, you know, of course, a lot of that was fiction, and I ended up going into a career that was based only on facts. But she planted that in my head, so I always, when I had a chance, I would write.
And that was third grade, you said?
That was third grade,
Wow.
Mrs. Smith. But anyway, back to the coal mines. Eventually, I moved to Virginia Beach, and I had a brother, Steve. He lives there.
Which is a big change from Bluefield and Grundy.
Absolutely. Absolutely, but I loved it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Lots of restaurants. That's always a big plus for me. But when I went to Virginia Beach, I worked for a temp agency, and they sent me to the Virginian Pilot down there to work. And it was huge.
And it's a newspaper?
It's the newspaper, Norfolk. It's headquartered in Norfolk, and it covered Norfolk, Virginia Beach, and all the outlying areas. But I went to that newsroom, and I was in love. There was like 100 people in there.
Oh, wow.
And it was just a big open newsroom.
Almost like here at the Progress.
Yeah, except 20 times larger.
Were you in awe when you walked in?
I was in awe, but, you know, back then in your early 20s, things don't, they never intimidated me too bad. I just thought, well, I got to figure this out.
Right.
I want to be part of this. So I ended up working there for 6 weeks. I worked for the editor doing the newsletter for the newspaper employees. And she, you know, she thought I did pretty well writing it and stuff. And it kind of gave me a taste for the newspapers. And I just admired these reporters, how serious they were. And they were always running around under deadline. And but that gave me the taste for the newspaper. So I didn't stay in Virginia Beach very long. I finally got to come home to Hayesville. And I believe I was 24 and moved back here and went to the Clay County Progress, which was over there where Sonia Silvers is now, the real estate office. And I went in to subscribe. That was my only reason for going in.
Just to get the paper.
And I just said, you guys don't need any help, do you? And they said, can you start Monday?
Wow.
And that was like Thursday, and I really wanted a few more days to get situated after the move. But I said, yeah, I can start Monday. So that was Lonnie Britt was the publisher then. So I went in on Monday morning, and I never left.
Still here.
I'm still here.
So you went in as a reporter?
No, I went in typesetting is what we called it, which is what the computer is now. So I went in, I formatted copy on the typesetter. And you had to take that copy out. It was like you put a floppy disk in this huge machine, which was a trendsetter, and the copy appeared. It was much like uh, a dark room,
Okay.
and you had to put chemicals in it, and it came out this long strip. You had to cut it out, hang it up on a clothesline, wait for it to dry. Then you put it through a waxer, and you put it on the page in column strips, and you took a roller and rolled it down flat. And that's how each page got built every week.
Wow.
And, of course, we had to do our own pictures in the dark room. It was quite a process, but it went pretty smooth. We didn't know any different.
Yeah, you didn't know any better, right? So now, looking back, I know I'm jumping ahead, but looking back just at the process and how different it is, because you mentioned something you kind of just in passing, that you had to develop your own pictures in a dark room. And if you go to an event and you take 6 pictures and they're all blurry, you just have to pick the best blurry picture, right?
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot you could do with it. You could try to focus it on the camera machine while you were developing it, but there was no Photoshop.
Right, and now we have digital cameras, so like I go to something and I'll take 200, 300 pictures for us to pick 2 or 3 from.
Exactly.
And it's no problem.
And we, all us purists, we fought digital cameras. You know, we were like, no.
It's ruining the business.
That's fake. You don't have to have any talent for that. But actually, you have to have an eye for photography, whether it's digital or not.
Yeah.
So, and it's like even when we got our, we've always used Mac here in our company and Community Newspapers Incorporated. Macs were the thing, mostly because of their graphic abilities.
Right.
But when the first Macs came rolling in the little old Progress office, we were all like, we're not using this newfangled stuff, you know.
Get this out. This is of Satan.
We're going to keep developing this copy like film. But after like a month, we were like, wow.
Yeah.
You
It totally changed the game,
yeah, you
right?
printed it out. We still had to cut it out and wax it, but we literally printed it directly from the computer instead
Right.
of putting it in a can and developing it and hanging it up to dry. So
I couldn't imagine. Maybe I need to watch a YouTube video of how the paper used to be.
you should. One of the downfalls of the way we used to do it, waxing it and laying it on the page, we used to take it to the Cherokee Scout where the print press used to be. And I had it in the back of a pickup one day, and we had just big boxes that carried broadsheets. And it came a storm, big wind, and the pages blew down Highway 64.
Oh gosh.
And that was a week's worth of work, and it was Wednesday. The paper has to be out Thursday. It's never not been.
Right.
And I thought, what are we going to do? So Lonnie Britt was with me, the publisher then, and we just walked down the road and we picked up what copy we could, picked up those pages, and we took them back to the Scout. And Weaver Carringer was my publisher there, the regional publisher, and he just shook his head when we came in with these soaking wet pages, and the copy, some of it was dirty. So what we actually ended up doing, we borrowed some copy from the Cherokee Scout. So there's a lot of Murphy stuff in the
There was
paper
a lot
that
of filler
week.
in that, huh?
And some of the paper had smudges on it where the copy had gotten wet and muddy. But we still got it out miraculously. I don't know how, but, computers are wonderful things. Thank God we are where we are now.
Yeah.
That we can lay it out on the computer desktop
Yep.
and send it directly to press. It's really different, and it's really wonderful.
Was it the typesetter, which is what you started? Was it one of those things that is so repetitive that even now, if you had to, you could probably do it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, the keyboards were the same as all keyboards. Right. But, yeah, I could do it. If I had to sit down at one, it would come back pretty quick.
So how then do you move? What's your big break to move from typesetter to, Becky, we need you to cover this? Do you remember the first story they sent you on as a reporter?
I'll tell you how that happened. My editor at that time was Louise Clements, and a lot of people will remember her. That was I think I came to the Progress in 1986 to subscribe and started working. But she had gotten a rare muscle disease, and so she was ill for some time, and they'd send me to the town board. And like I said, I like to write, and so I had to write, and I had to, and Louise would help me, answer my questions and all that. So eventually I got sent to more and more and more stuff. And, I would stay at night to lay out the paper, whatever needed to be
Just
done,
whatever, yeah.
photography. Went to events on the weekends. And Louise passed away while I was there. And she was such a wonderful woman, but I had learned a lot from her. And when she passed away, I had to step into that role. And it was a tough role to fill, being 24 and little experience.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I think that actually helped me, having to learn how to do it and do it correctly.
Right from the get-go.
Right from the get-go. I remember my first budget. Well, I didn't become publisher till 1992, but my first budget, which is a huge ordeal in any company, Weaver Carringer flopped it down on my desk, and he said, "This is due in a week." And it was like 15 pages. And I said, okay.
All right.
So
there again, that accounting kind of came in handy, didn't it?
It came in handy. I never thought I would use it, other than the payroll stuff. But, yeah, it came in very handy. Then just understanding that you got to make this to cover that. And that seems simple, but it's not really if you're not in there looking at the numbers.
Right. Yep. So that brought us, you said that you became publisher in
1992.
1992. Talk about that, because as a newspaper, it's our job to present the facts and present stories. And how do you, even today as a publisher, how do you make sure that you're down the middle? Because, look, let's just be honest. We're going to be honest. Mm-hmm. People see stuff and read stuff the way they want to. So let's just throw that out there right now. But as a publisher, I know, I've worked here for almost 9 years. I know that you try to go down the middle. How hard is it, especially back then when you're still fairly new to the position, to kind of maintain a straight line down the middle without veering into personal beliefs or the perception that you're presenting something?
I think it's mostly perception. I just live my work life the way I live my life. You just be honest. It's not veering left or right or going down the middle. It's just be honest. And that was always so important to my parents growing up. And I didn't know any other way to do it. And sometimes it was hard to be honest with people because they didn't want to hear it.
Right.
But I've never cared how people vote or what they think. I just care that I'm doing the best I can to make sure it's the truth and or the truth as I'm told. And I'm not going to say some politician hadn't told me a tale along the way.
Right.
I'm sure they have. But I've never willingly or knowingly put anything out there that I thought was the truth or even an exaggeration. If a story's dramatic, you don't need to dramatize it.
Right.
The facts
Just
speak.
let the facts do it.
But it's a lot easier to be honest in life. As you know, you're an honest person. You don't have to think as much. What I say last time?
Right, yeah.
And you don't owe people and you don't have to appease people. Just be respectful and good to people.
Yep.
That's all.
So that was probably one of the biggest storylines from the early 90s. And if you want to go back and revisit that or something that happens between that and what I'm about to talk about, that's fine. But I remember I was a youngster sitting in my bedroom one night watching The Tonight Show.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And Jay Leno used to have a segment where it was headlines. And all it was is newspapers around the country that had funny headlines. Mm-hmm. And I see he holds up a card, and he says, "From the Clay County Progress." And I'm not going to go into what the headline is.
Well, you can tell it. If you're going to pique everybody's interest.
Okay, so the headline, correct me, I know we've got it hanging in your office.
We've got it hanging in my office. I may have to go look.
This may not be the exact quote, but it's something along the lines, 2 men caught in lewd act on top of chunky gal.
Correct. Please don't put that on my tombstone, anyone out there, because I will never live that down.
But that news story in itself is something else to read.
Let me give you a little background on that.
Please do.
Debbie Jo Ferguson worked for me then, and we were in the back room, again, over there where Silver's Realty is, and we were putting the pages out. Headlines are always, you're supposed to make them interesting, right?
Well, you nailed it.
But she and I were laughing about it. Wouldn't this be funny? And we thought only we would get it, the cleverness of it, that people would just read it as it were. But the next morning, it was like on Atlanta radio stations. It was on a TV station.
By the way, that clip you can still find on YouTube.
Okay.
So I may link it to this so people can hear that.
But I didn't know how Dick Neesmith and Tom Wood, that's the chairman president of our company, and very wonderful people, but they're very journalistic oriented. And so I thought, oh, geez.
What have I done?
What have I done? And it seemed like it never stopped. And I don't even think you could find a newspaper with that particular headline story on it today.
Well,
you found one.
It was a miracle. It just happened to be tucked away in a box in our storage closet that I was straightening up one day and just happened to find. And we'd looked for it for years. It's in none of the records or anything. It just happened to be there. By the way, if you're listening and you're not familiar with Clay County, Chunky Gal is an area of the county. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to clear that up. That you were not referring to a specific person in that.
No, I wasn't.
It was just a fortunate area of the county where this happened.
It was, but as it turned out, I think one of them thought it was hilarious. The other thought not so much. But again, I'm still here.
You survived.
I survived Chunky Gal. But you were talking about big things in the county, and I don't want to leave it like alcohol was the most important. It wasn't. It was probably one of the most controversial. But we had a lot of tragedies. We had the school bus wreck.
Oh, yeah.
There's been things that we went through together, and it was just amazing to see how the county does that when they have to.
Yep, and I think it's important too because a lot of people that maybe just read the newspaper and never worked in the newspaper environment, I think it would be easy to think that when something tragic does happen like that we look at it as just another story, mm-hmm. but it's not. I mean,
it's not.
We're members of the community too, so anytime tragedy hits, it's still a personal thing, especially in this small town where everybody knows everybody. It's not a factory. We're not a news factory that we separate ourselves to the point to where we don't feel emotion over something.
And we don't enjoy it. People think, you just did. I don't even enjoy doing stories about drug arrests because there's a story behind that.
Yep.
There's a sad story. Mm-hmm. And people are hurting behind that. And so it's never a joy, whether it be tragedy or criminal reports. It's never a joy because there's a grandmother, there's a mother, father, brother, sister, wife, husband, child involved. So it's never just a story. It's a person that is having a hard time, and you always hope you never see him again in the paper in that respect.
And, kind of, if you're in the paper, your life, there's been some kind of life-altering event, either good or bad.
Yes. Either
some tragedy like we're talking about or your grandson caught the biggest fish out of the lake, something. So everything we put in is life-affecting for someone, and possibly more than that one person through our readers. And I've never seen anybody in this office take that lightly.
No, we are a community newspaper because of our community, because we walk hand in hand with them, and without them, we wouldn't be able to fill these pages. But I was talking about my third grade English teacher. Even just these little clippings, some kid caught the biggest fish. That can have an impact later on. Mm-hmm. Just giving them confidence, and everybody saw their accomplishment, and it's maybe hanging up on the refrigerator. And Facebook is okay for social things, but you can't hang it up on the refrigerator, and you can't put it in a photo album.
Right.
A newspaper clipping is a living, breathing thing that lasts forever.
It's a record.
It's a record.
Okay, so we talked about your national fame from the Jay Leno show. You also found yourself on the national level with Eric Rudolph.
Yes. We were working with the Cherokee Scout on that. So we all, during the weekend, there was one particular weekend, I think David Brown had just come as publisher over there. But there was like 10 of us out with assignments on, various angles of the story. But I had went up Tuskwitty, up to the campground up there. anyway, just looking. There was supposed to be militia people camping up there. I think there were. It was just a scary time in the county. My husband worked out of town, and I kept the doors locked, which I never have ever worried about anything like that. And it wasn't particularly Eric Rudolph that I was afraid of. It was just there were so many people here. There was, the government was here. There was militia here. It was just a whole different feeling.
Right.
It wasn't a safe feeling.
Right.
With everybody being here.
When he was caught, what obviously, that's not just a national news story with the focus on the Olympics. That's a worldwide news story. How much pressure did you have to make sure it was covered? Because, like you said, the Clay County Progress team with the Scout.
We did, and we did a special edition of it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty rare to find, too. I think we have some still here. But you don't really feel so much. You don't look out. I feel more pressure about people who live here than I do people outside, because I don't run into them in the grocery stores.
Right.
I'm not going to run into Eric Rudolph's, in the grocery store or whatever, his family. Well, you could, because they were from here. But pressure to me is when it's a family that I know or know of. That's pressure. That's pressure to report the story right and correctly and honestly, but with instilling as little hurt as possible. Because some stories are just sad, and they have bad things happen, and criminal charges even. So you have to always just think that you're looking in somebody's eyes when you're writing about them. Would you say it to them what you're writing?
Right. Oh, and what you're writing, would you appreciate that if you were the subject?
Exactly. And you're never going to like anything that's negative.
Right.
I'm sure some of my high school antics, had I been caught, might have made the newspaper. I don't know. But you're never going to like anything negative. But the thing to do is to understand that's what happened, and that's the end of it. You don't have to embellish or add to.
Right. That's not our job.
No.
Right. Okay, so you go from Rudolph. What the next story that kind of jumps out at you?
Wow. I worked with Tony Woody. I have to say most of the antics in my life probably involved Tony Woody, because he tortured me. Tony Woody was the longest serving sheriff of Clay County. He served to 2006. And so when I was a cub reporter, that was my first sheriff, and long-time sheriff. But there's been a lot of big stories here, and I've been to so many accidents and fatalities I can't count them. But it doesn't matter if you've been to 20; they're so painful.
Right.
What's painful is to see the family.
Yeah.
I have called families before and said, I have a picture of a wreck. I just want to let you know it's going to be on the front page, because you don't want to surprise people,
right?
Because they're already in pain. And a lot of times we don't know the families, and we can't do that. But and we like to offer them a chance to say something about their loved ones if it was a death resulted in it. Sometimes they want to, and sometimes they don't, and I totally respect either way. And I always hate making that phone call.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
I feel like I'm intruding if someone's had a death in the family and it made the news. It feels intrusive to call, but sometimes they want to talk about them, because that person's not about how they died. That person's about how they lived.
Right.
And often by talking to their family, you can tell people more about them.
Yep. Yep. One of the biggest stories, well, I've got a couple jotted down here, but since I've been here, one of the biggest was a couple years ago when we had the wildfires.
Oh, yeah, Boteller fires.
Yeah, and I remember that was a story that developed daily, hourly, really. We would be sitting downstairs in the office, and it would be smoky, and then an hour later, the sun's shining. But I don't think people realize how much goes into, especially when you're a weekly publication, right. And that story is changing daily, which now, throw a plug in here, claycountyprogress.com, we update daily. There's new stories, there's right. Exclusive stories, so make sure you check that out. But at the time, we were trying to keep up with everything,
We were, and we actually won an award, and we've won a lot, and awards don't mean a whole lot to me sometimes, but sometimes they do. And I've got to hand it to Lori Ross.
Yeah.
She was on top of that fire. She attended fire meetings. She was everywhere, and Lorraine Bennett too. But they were, it was a constant moving part, and we kept in constant contact. And, even back then you updated Facebook all the time with anything new that we could tell. And just something like that, you never know. You're going to probably be out of your seat every hour going to see something or take pictures.
Or interview someone.
And you don't, in interviews like that, you have to be real respectful, too, because a lot of times they're so busy planning, and coordinating that they don't have time to talk to you, and that's totally understandable. We're not their priority, nor should we be.
Right.
But Lori Ross handled that like a pro.
Yep.
She did a great job on that.
Another one that Lori played a big part in, and I've got it jotted down because I remember the entire office helped with this, and it was when we had the gas shortage.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And our days were spent calling different gas stations to find out if they had gas or when they would be getting gas, and then trying to put that on our Facebook page and website to keep the community informed. Yes. And that got exhausting.
It is exhausting because you can't just call once a day.
No.
Because the prices would change, every
and
hour
the supply.
Sometimes. Yes.
So
it is exhausting, but I think it's such a good thing for the community to have comparisons. And it even shows you if one station's $1 higher, there's a problem with that.
And something else during that, too, we also had, you were talking about how this is a community newspaper because of the community.
Mm-hmm.
We would have people call in and say, hey, Ingalls has gas, let people know, and we appreciated that.
Exactly.
But in those moments when it's like that, and literally everybody in this office was calling gas stations, did it kind of give you the feel of that newsroom in Virginia Beach?
It absolutely does. And it's invigorating to be moving like that and then get it out and see that you have provided some helpful information.
Right. I think that's something that somebody who's never worked in the newspaper business, think of a hands-on project. You're building something, you're a birdhouse, and you have that moment where you're completed and you look at it and you're like, oh, I've done that. For us, it's when we get information out to the community that they can use, that we're like, we.
And we're like a team of carpenters. We're all doing something different on that house, the newspaper, and every single thing that somebody's doing is very important to it.
Right.
So everybody has different jobs, but there's not one of those that you could do without.
Right.
And have a good newspaper. But one of the saddest times at the newspaper that I remember, this again was on the national level, was 911.
Yeah.
I remember that so vividly. Our office was at Moore's Plaza that morning, and we were on our computers, and we had cable TV because we saw it on TV. Saw the planes hitting, and that's right in front of the school. My daughter Gracie was in school, and that was that's the most terrified I've ever been for our nation.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get to her, but I had to cover that news. We didn't know, was it going to be nationwide? Were they going to hit the dam? There was kinds of things going on. So I didn't panic. I just left Gracie at school, which is where she should have been, and I went over to the sheriff's office, and I sat in the little dispatch room with Audrey and them, and we watched more things unfolding, And, I just told the sheriff, I said, call me if, you're getting any threats or about any places around here and stuff. And so I went back to the office, and we closed the office, and we went to church. They had a service over at First Methodist, just a prayer, just where whoever could hear about it. We didn't have cell phones, we had them, but they were
rare and didn't work.
Right. So there was probably maybe 50 people over there, but that was kind of comforting to me to go with with our staff, who is also our family, and sit in church, because what else could you do but just pray?
Right.
Pray that everything would be okay. And we lost a lot of people, upwards of 3,000, but we're okay because we're resilient.
Right.
We're a resilient country, and we'll be okay.
Going from that monumental event to another one, last year COVID hits.
Yes.
And big changes. We were just talking about with the gas shortage, how everybody was in here calling people, and then all of a sudden,
Nothing.
we're not here.
Exactly.
Everybody that could was working from home, self included. And I've told you this before, but I want to tell you again. You called me one day because I was working from home, and I was watching every Roy Cooper press conference, every Brian Kemp press conference, every Donald Trump press conference, and trying to keep people updated on the latest. And you called me and you said, take a break, go for a walk. And I appreciate that, because it does start weighing on you when you're in that. So
it does.
You as a publisher, how do you determine, like with the COVID and when we were all in that moment, when you need to, let's take a break from this?
Well, you have to step outside of it. You have to do what you have to do to protect yourself and people around you. But you also have to be able to step outside of whatever it is.
Right.
Nothing should be all-consuming. I mean, it's a horrific thing, the pandemic. We've lost 750,000 people. But I could tell in your tone, you just have to sense things about people. You can tell when they're kind of tired. They need they need to read a book or go fishing or do something, get out of the disaster mode.
Right.
And and we all need to do that. We all need to know when to turn it off. And it's okay to turn it off. That doesn't mean you're dismissive or uncaring. It means I need to do this for my own good and my family's good.
It was a wake-up call to me when you said that, because I literally sat back and looked, and I was working in my little man cabin.
Yeah.
And I had my computer screen in front of me. I had one TV here with a news conference with the audio up, and another one here with the closed captioning. And I thought, I can't do this. I can't keep doing this. And you were the wake-up call for that. And, I mean, we still kept up to date on everything, but I wasn't just
consumed.
Yeah. And if you hadn't have told me, look, take a break from that, I would have snapped.
You were trying to do a good job, and you did do a good job keeping people updated. I could just tell by the tone there was nothing else. And there, even during COVID, there's still life is still going on. There's still good things happening.
Yep.
There's still music and kids and husbands and wives, and they're still living their daily lives, and they're a lot different, and they were a lot more difficult, but there's still life. And I think that people weathered it pretty well, and we have lost a lot of people here, more this year, and it's so sad to look at our obituary page and that the ages are so much younger. I know I'm getting older, but even the ages of the deaths are so much younger, and it's just sad to see. It's sad to see when an older person passes away, but to see 30, 40, and 50-year-olds regularly, that's tragic.
Coming out of the pandemic, things are seemingly improving, but and you can tell that in our coverage, we haven't ignored COVID, right, but it's not on every page. How this is kind of I don't know how to ask this question. How do you know when it's time to move on, like you're talking about?
Well, when you start to look at it and you say, well, I'm not giving any new information.
There's nothing new.
I'm not helping anyone. The reason we give that information is to help people keep up with it and know how they can plan their lives, whatever their plans may be. If they know what's going on in their county, with the positive rates and all that stuff, they can plan better. They can know what's best for their families. But when you start just running it and, well, nothing's changed from last week, And then the next week you run another, here's an update, nothing's changed.
Here's a rerun. Yeah.
But, still COVID will be on our front pages for months. And we'll do another update in a week or two. But there's not been, I think we have 9 positives. And but we are still seeing some deaths from this variant. And so we'll continue to cover it, but we're not going to indulge. We're not going to just run it with nothing to tell you.
Kind of switching gears here. This is going to be kind of rapid fire stuff.
Oh boy.
Other than the typesetting and the process, what's the biggest change you've seen in the newspaper business from the time you started till now?
The biggest change I've seen locally and nationally is not just in the newspaper, it's in the society. And it's kind of a sad change. There's still so many good people, but people have become so hateful and narrow-minded. Regardless of what you believe or how you believe, it doesn't matter. But because you believe something and somebody believes something different doesn't make them wrong. It makes them have a different idea.
Right.
And we can't seem to accept that. And sometimes our editorial pages get pretty rough. And it's funny because some of them are even neighbors, and I'm sure, I hope they get along fine. They just have really different views. But people are more apt to call here and just, call us names or say something nasty. And honestly, there is no agenda here. We're all different. We're all outspoken. We're all opinionated. But not in the newspaper. That's not our place.
Right.
That's not our little personal media outlet. And I think a lot of that is because people are confused with news and opinions. And they're confused because on TV, we have a lot of people. You can go to any channel and get your feelings stroked. That makes me feel better. That's what I thought.
Right.
But they have a lot of people with opinions at the news hour, and people confuse that. And the opinions in our paper, I think it's probably like 80-point font. It's pretty clear these are opinions. This is not the news.
Right.
And I think, back when we had news on 3 networks, 30 minutes a day, we were much better off.
Yep.
Because if you have to fill 24 hours, you're going to put some crap on there.
Well, and you have to create drama to draw ratings because, it is amazing to me. We've talked about this before. I remember as a kid, you turned on the 6:30 news or 6 o'clock news, whatever time it was.
Yeah.
It was 30 minutes. We got all the news we needed.
You got it all. And your newscaster did it with a straight face.
Just told you what happened.
They didn't roll their eyes. They didn't grimace,
Didn't speculate on the next move.
I don't care what that newscaster thinks.
Right.
Just give it to me.
Let me decide.
And actually, I've kind of gone back. I've gone through those cycles where I've watched news constantly during elections. And again, it's just like you with the COVID coverage. It's not good for you.
Right.
You have to step out of it.
Politics probably worse than the COVID.
Well, politics in itself is interesting, but hateful politics and this not allowing other people to feel different is ignorance. That's not interesting.
Right. Talking about politics, I know that's one of your favorite things that you've covered is local races.
Elections, yeah. I love elections.
You might not want to share this. If not, we can edit it out.
I'll share anything.
Well, you were telling me last week about an adventure you had on election night when you were leaving after they announced the results.
Oh, yeah. I had my daughter, and Ann Ferguson was with me, and I always preach to people, now, if you're going to go to the election board and watch the results, do not make a face. I don't care who you like or who you don't like. Keep a straight face.
Right.
So they were like, yeah, we will. So anyway, after the results, it really had nothing to do with the results, but after it was over, I was looking down at my notebook, just kind of checking off the numbers, and then I tripped over the parking curb over there and fell on the floor or fell in the road. And Ann and Gracie had already gotten in the car, had the music turned up. They were rocking and rolling or whatever.
And talking about the results.
And I was laying there, and my lip was bleeding, my nose was bleeding, and my eye was black. And Dwight Penland Commissioner Dwight Penland came over to help me up. And I look up, and there's probably 15 or 20 people staring down at me.
And what are Gracie and Ann doing?
They're singing to the radio, and I was beating on the door from the laying on the concrete, and they still didn't hear me. And then they looked out, and they saw this crowd, and they were like, "What's going on?" And Dwight got me up, and here I had this bloody face. But it's humbling, but it really doesn't bother me because I don't know. I just feel like I kind of everybody has those things
Absolutely.
happen, and it's really funny. It kind of adds a little spice.
You just found out who your friends were that night, right?
I found out who my friends were. I think Dwight's a pretty good friend. He picked me up. So.
What's one of the craziest stories?
Oh, it had to involve Tony Woody. I always told Tony when he was sheriff, I said, when I die, I want you to preach. And he said, why? I said, at my funeral. I said, because you embellish everything that you say. And he did. He was a fine sheriff, though. He was serious about law enforcement, but he knew how to combine a little fun with it. So there's a million things involving him.
Okay, maybe what's the oddest?
The oddest?
Yeah, the one thing.
Well, probably the fruit basket caper. I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about it. I need Melvin Cantrell here. We have lots of stories, but one election year, politics has always been big here and competitive, but not mean.
Right.
Well, one year, the Democrats had swept the county offices, and our election board director was, very strict Republican all her life. But she was so strict, some people took her as being kind of grouchy, I guess you would say, or ornery. But anyway, so that year, she received a big, the candidates who won, the Democratic candidates who won, received fruit baskets, real nice, expensive fruit baskets from her.
Oh, yeah?
And her name was Paula Gruner. I don't think there's any harm in, and she was such a good election board director. She was very strict. So, of course, she got some of them called to thank her, and she was, she could not believe that someone had sent baskets from her congratulating the Democrats on their win. And so I called. It sounded like a Tony Woody something. It just, something told me he was involved. So I called him, and I said, Tony, tell me about the big fruit basket caper. And he said, hold on a minute. Ellie, don't eat that kumquat. You're eating the evidence. And I thought, oh, yes, he is definitely involved. But he never gave it up. But as it turns out, and we ran a short story on the front page, and I think we called it the fruit basket caper. As it turned out, someone had called and ordered all these fruit baskets and charged it to Paula Gruner's and put her name on it. And I think it was like $1,000.
Holy cow.
And so, of course she didn't find that humorous at all, but they straightened it out, and they ended up paying for it, not Paula didn't. But that was kind of how politics were back then. It's like it was competitive, but they did it in a
friendly
way. And so Tony Woody never said, yes, I did it, but I think he had to foot that bill.
He never denied it either,
He
right?
didn't deny, no.
Okay, well, all right. Maybe this may be the last question here.
Okay.
And I'll let you go on with your busy day. Where do you see the newspaper industry in 10 years?
I see it divided. I think that there'll be more print e-editions, and I think it'll be split. Now it's majority by far print editions. But I think in 10 years and maybe even 5 years, you're going to see more of it online. And you will have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Free press does not mean free press. We have to pay reporters and people like you, digital directors. But it'll change that as the demographics get older. We're lucky in Clay County demographically, this is what they need and this is what they want. And they can get both.
Right.
But we want to reach younger people too, so that's where you come in with digital media. Personally, I don't care to read articles online as much as
Thanks, Becky.
holding them in hand.
I appreciate
No,
that.
I like short stuff. I like teasers. I like maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs. But even like to read a book, I don't want to read a book online. But yeah, I'll read a story online, but not just. I still like
Right.
both.
But I think you're right. I think in 10 years, it's definitely the pendulum's going to swing.
It will, and you know, the population in our county of 55 and up is. I saw a demographic on this a couple of years ago, but it's like 55%. That's pretty high. But our age is going to be, you know, going to the great press in the sky someday. And I hope that we can keep people interested in their communities and their governments. You can't, when people stop caring what their government does, particularly local government, sometimes it can be boring.
Mm-hmm.
Everything they do affects your life in some way, and when you stop caring, that's going to be bad. That's
Yep.
a dangerous situation.
Well, just if you stop caring what's happening in your community, period.
Exactly,
That's
about
bad.
anything. And, you know, of course I'm biased. I love the progress. I've grown up here. I was 24 when I came. I'm
And now you are
59.
not 24.
Now I'm not 24. But it's been my life and career, and, you know, when I do leave it, I hope that whoever comes in here has integrity, and they keep that community spirit alive, and that they keep that honesty that you have to put out a newspaper. You know, you can't do it right without it.
I lied. This is the last story. Is there one kind of story that you hope you get to cover before you call it quits?
I hope it's me seeing the Rolling Stones. But I kind of don't know if that's going to happen. I think Mick's back on tour, though, isn't he?
I think so. Yeah.
So, you know, I used to go to concerts a lot. When we lived in Bluefield, we'd go to Roanoke or we'd go to Bristol, Virginia to concerts. So I saw a lot of bands. But I never got to see the Stones or the Who. And those are 2 biggies I always wanted to see.
Well, look, you never know who's going to show up over at the Georgia Mountain Fairgrounds, right?
Right. I don't know if I can't get no satisfaction. I don't know if I'll be hearing that over there, but that's okay.
Well, Becky Long, thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Thanks, Travis, and you still have a job after this.
All right. Well, you haven't heard the edit yet.
Have a good one.